It's time to be woke. Take off your shades. It helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the fact.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy, and it is Friday. Woohoo! This means nothing to me, but it means a lot more to other people, especially those in our audience. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a lot to talk about. This is really our first legitimate show in a week and a half because we decided to take 2 days off around the holiday weekend and then had a rather unsuccessful attempt at doing a show on Wednesday with some bad bandwidth. But we think we've got it all figured out. We've got a new system installed for my lovely and talented co-host, and it looks like we are a go for Friday. So fuck it, or friendly, or whatever you want to call it. Anyways, I would like to, at this point, introduce my lovely and talented co-host, Miss Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Hey, good morning, Andy, and good morning to everybody who's joining us, and thank you so much for your patience. Wednesday was a cluster. So I'm definitely going to talk about that because this kind of goes into the monopolies, Big Tech, and antitrust. So before we get into it, we are obviously always live and interactive, and anything could happen. So I want to give a shout out to those people who are joining us already. Good morning, Mike Toller, Arif Hassan, who's joining us from Liberia. Good morning. Kami John says, aloha, gang. Good morning. So, yeah, as we go through some of these topics, and I want to say that this is so important when it comes to antitrust and free speech, privacy rights. They all go together, and the reason that we keep doing these topics is because I keep seeing it over and over again where we're not getting it. We're really not getting it, and our legislature is not getting it. So I want to show this from both sides of the aisle so that you really start to understand where all of these things come into play and why it affects you like it affected me on Wednesday. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Mike is saying, he says, he's proposing it should be called Flippant Friday. Okay, all right, let's do it. Flippant Friday it is. So
I don't like that.
Real cool. You don't like? Oh no, Mike. No, we're gonna do Fuck It Friday.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Amber's not here.
It's got to have that F-bomb in it. I'm sorry. By the way, Carrie, it's nice to see that your connection is somewhat stable. It's probably the first time that you've ever been described in your life as stable.
Yeah, not just issues but subscriptions, right? So all right, so let me back up. I live in New Mexico, and New Mexico has shoddy at best, except when it comes to the city's internet connectivity. During COVID, we saw this being exposed all across the country, particularly when we wanted children to stay at home and learn online. We didn't have the infrastructure in place. And here in New Mexico, we actually have fiber in the cities. In Santa Fe, where the state legislature is, here in Albuquerque, we have fiber, but it runs along the highway. If you live off of the highway, forget it. And everybody was kind of like, well, this is just the way it is. And all of the big cell companies, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, all of them were touting 4 and 5G coverage all across the state, and it's a lot. I have been fighting with T-Mobile since day one when I got here, that what you have advertised and what you are providing are two entirely different things. They don't give a shit because they didn't have to. All the other networks are doing the same thing. So we had a massive storm come through. It was literally a hurricane, which goes into climate change. but all the towers now have been affected and none of them give a shit. It's been over 2 weeks. So right now, everybody in the state, most everybody in the state, is paying for LTE coverage and service while actually being charged for 4 and 5G. And there's nobody doing anything. So that is another antitrust violation. They all share the same towers, and they're all like, well, we'll let AT&T pay for it, we'll let T-Mobile pay for it, but at the same time they're charging customers those higher rates for coverage. I got caught in the middle, couldn't stream, so as of today I had to spend more money to get satellite, and it's not cheap, let me tell you. It is wicked expensive for very, very little bandwidth, so I'm hoping it holds out for the show today. So
And on that note, if you'd like to become a Patreon subscriber to our show,
right. Yeah, we are on Patreon. Well, very rarely do we ask, but we are on Patreon. It's Hair of the Dog Show. So yeah, we thank you every little bit, even $1. Do what you can. So we appreciate it. Because it's not just us, our show and our production here. We also support things like Tour for the Poor and other content creators and journalists and programs. So we do that. So, but Andy, before we get into our bigger topic, you had something you wanted to talk about.
yes, I did, Carrie. Thank you. Wanted to talk briefly about the March for Medicare for All March that's coming up on July the 24th. And you and I have both done promos for that, and we've been promoting it here on our show. And there's a huge number of different activist groups and progressive left groups that are putting their heads down and together and pushing forward with this to try to make it a great event. And it sounds like it is. And they're adding new celebrity speakers every day. So this is all a very positive thing, except there's a group on Twitter that are trying to derail it, let's say. And the way that this has happened is that there are a number of what we might want to call faux-gressives that are on Twitter that have nice, fancy descriptions in their profiles about, I am a Bernie supporter, Black Lives Matter, all of the lovely tags that we all use as progressives. And then you don't look at the words, you look at their actions, and it becomes pretty clear that they're, DNC operatives / centrist whispering apologists, and they're just progressive by name. And so what we've seen is that in the US, the Medicare for All push is one of the most heavily favored policies by Americans, even on the right and the far right. The vast majority of Americans want Medicare for all, right? And if this is the subject of this march, it's very difficult to come out looking like an honest purveyor of information if you are against it, right? Especially if you call yourself a progressive. So it's really difficult to attack the actual thing that people are marching for. So what do we see happen, right? We see the people that are against it attack the people that are for it, that are organizing for it, that have worked their butts off for months and months and years to try to organize these things, right? And where have we seen that before, right? We've seen that maybe in 2020 with the Bernie Sanders campaign, where there was virtually nothing to pick on about Bernie because he's of his integrity for his entire 50 plus years of political activism. And so what do the people that are against Bernie do, they attack the supporters, right? So now we're seeing the same tactics involved. Like, I mean, if you are a purporter, if you're purported to be for Medicare for all, and there is a large group of activists that are putting together a huge march, right, which could be, you know, in all intents and purposes, a game changer for getting the word out for this support, then even, you know, on the worst case scenario, you would at least allow that event to happen. But we see these people that are attacking the organizers of this. And it's for one of two reasons. Either it's because they're just bad actors, right, that don't want to see it and are, you know, DNC operatives, for lack of a better term, you know, or they had hurt feelings because they've been called out on their actions, right? And they're just bastards, right? So it's one of two reasons, and neither reason is good. So we're seeing this now. So when you see people that are against this march, right, something that the vast majority of Americans want, then you need to call them out. You need to say, look, if you are a purport of being in wanting Medicare for all, then you need to shut the fuck up, right? And stop attacking, because if you don't, then we know who you are. And that's the end of my rant, Carrie.
Well, I agree with everything you said, and this is totally my opinion. I am not an organizer. I am in no way affiliated with the group other than just a supporter of it, strong supporter. And there were two critiques that I saw from these bad faith actors. Number one, the first point I want to make is in 2016, the Journal of American Medicine did a study on ad revenue for the big networks that came from pharma and insurance companies. And what they came up with was a total number of 276 billion with a B, spent in ad revenue for these big networks and promoters from these big pharma and big insurance companies. So of course, you have the small people like us who are literally suffering and dying, wanting policy, and then you have $276 billion in ad revenue. Of course, you're not going to get that from mainstream media, and it's a hell of an incentive to push back on the policy like Medicare for all. That's my first point. Second point is this critique about white supremacists and everything else. First off, my opinion is I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if there is a white supremacist who happens to support it. There are a whole lot of people across this country who are shitty people that support it. That is not the point. And I would lean into Daryl Davis on this one. If we have some bad behaviors and belief systems, that comes from a place of hurt. And if I am a white supremacist, I am personally not, but if I am a white supremacist, it is coming from a place where I feel less than, and I am trying to make myself feel better by putting someone else down. A policy like Medicare for all that lifts everyone up, because let's be honest about it. Most white recipients of welfare programs in this country are the majority. Right. So if you're in this country and you're being made to feel bad about needing a safety social net, of course you're going to find something else, something so vapid as the color of your skin to make yourself feel better. If we lift people up, all people, a lot of that goes away. A lot of it goes away, and then we can get rid of some of that division. So when people talk about, and I have said this before during the Trump administration, had Trump actually embraced Medicare for all, called it Trump Care, and handed everybody a gold card, I'd have been right on board with it, because too many people are losing their lives. And then we saw the pandemic and everything else that's going on. Yeah, absolutely. Medicare for all, above and beyond all of these social performative issues, and above all of the critiques and pushback that's coming out. It's ridiculous. Absolutely. So I agree with you, Andy. And you're so much nicer about it than I would be.
Well, it's funny
Yeah.
because and I agree with your point, because if you watch any of the mainstream media news coverage, especially MSNBC or CNN, what you see when you watch these is that most of the ads are from the healthcare industry and the insurance industry, right? And the pharmaceutical industry, almost every single one. So not only, if you watch those shows, not only are you getting fed usually just bullshit and lies, after half an hour, you're there's a good chance you're going to be a hypochondriac, right? So it's absolutely abhorrent. The whole healthcare industry in the United States, and the vast majority of Americans want Medicare for all, but you've got these big players in the game from these industries that provide so much money to the politicians, and they're bought and paid for, and they can't make decisions that industry doesn't want. And they like their advantage. They like being multi-billionaire people, and they don't want to lose that, right? Their short-term gain is more important than your health or your ability to not go bankrupt.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Andrew, good morning. This is your first time tuning in. Thank you so much. And yeah, we are new on Fred Hampton leftists. We've been around for a while, but we absolutely support Fred Hampton leftists. And then going back to the racist thing, what did Fred Hampton do in Chicago? He went to the poor white racist group and said, "Hey, we have the same issues. We have the same issues. We need to fight together." And what did that do? Working together with Black people and white people who understood what was really going on and what was dividing us, they worked phenomenally well together. So this is what scares them about a policy like Medicare for all. And let's recognize that, right? So I do not support a Klan member, but if I have one marching with me that's going to save my kid, my community, my country, fuck yeah. And I'm going to do what I can to make him to abandon his self-destructive policies. That's my take on it, right? So my neighbors are Trumpers. My neighbors are badass leftists. We got to work together. So yeah,
Absolutely.
And on that note,
that's perfect.
Yeah, so this is the same concept that we're going to talk about this morning with the 1st and the 14th. And we tried to do this on Wednesday and it was just too choppy and whatever. But I feel that this is just so important. Obviously, it touches so many areas that we need to talk about it. So there were 2 examples that came up over the last week during the Freedom Holiday, where we're watching our freedoms being just eroded completely, and we're supposed to celebrate that. A lot of people didn't celebrate it because of the recognition that is going on here. And I have to be cautious in talking about what we learned in high school, because I didn't grow up in this country. And what I learned about US history was apparently completely different than what you learned in junior high and high school here in the United States. I got comprehensive story, all of it. US kids don't, and that just blows my mind. So there again is censorship. We don't want to talk about these horrible things that happen. Margot, I grew up primarily in Southeast Asia, Pakistan, Hong Kong, and Thailand, and then traveled around those areas. So I went to international schools. So a lot of my classmates were from all over the world. So we got the real story on US history, not just US history, but other countries. So when I came back, it was a little bit of a culture shock to know that you guys didn't know what Juneteenth was, or that you guys didn't know about the Trail of Tears and why that happened. So we're seeing all of that stuff come out right now, particularly in the pushback where the new moniker for troubled snowflake white people was Karen, and now it's colonizer. And having the conversation with a friend of mine, I'm like, I love all of it. I love it because while it seems like a negative and you're going through it and all of this pushback, the fact that you have white people who are so bothered by it, that's the first step. That is honestly the first step, because if they were apathetic, now we have a problem. But the fact that people are really raging against this, I know it looks bad, but it's really the first step, because now it's bothered them. It's moved them from a space of complacency into one of pushback. So I believe, I've seen it time and time again, I believe that we are on the right track. Keep pushing, particularly if you're going to be a good ally as a white person to our indigenous, black, brown, whatever. Keep pushing. Just let it roll off your back, but keep doing what you're doing, because we're getting there. We're absolutely getting there, and everybody's going through this kind of group therapy session. So this is why the subjects of free speech and privacy are so critical. So we're going to start with religion, which is everybody's favorite topic, my favorite topic. So Andy, this is the first graphic with Hobby Lobby. And Hobby Lobby, I think, is just a beautiful, beautiful case of First Amendment. And I titled this First Amendment violations, but it isn't. It isn't. So when we were talking before we started the show, Andy and I were talking about all of the people on the left who were so happy that Trump got deplatformed, so happy. And when I saw that, I was like, oh God, no. And I know Mike, who's watching with us, we've had these conversations about censorship. So when you have people on the left going, he's so divisive, blah, 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 get him off the platform. I was like, oh God, they are now allowing all of these platforms to do it to them. And that is what we've seen happen, right? So in the links this morning, I posted this really great write-up that Glen Greenwald had. And he had an interview with the Colorado District 4 Congressman Ken Buck. Ken Buck is a Tea Party Republican. Why is Ken Buck the only one pushing back on big tech from the Republican side? And there are only just a tiny handful of Democrats joining him on these antitrust things, right? So that is a huge story. And I've invited Sherry Weiss, our expert on antitrust, to come back and talk about that, because there was a 405-page congressional report on how big tech is absolutely a monopoly and in violation of our antitrust laws. That's a big story. So here we have now the comparison of Hobby Lobby. Love them or hate them, they put out this ad, and they do this every holiday where they lean into religion. Now, for those of you out there who are atheists or whatever else, follow me on this. I am deeply religious. And what I am most offended about with Hobby Lobby is that they've monetized religion. I don't like it. But they have every right to put this ad out, because that is part of free speech, right? And the First Amendment, separation of church and state, it's only 2 sentences. And you should go out and read it. And those 2 sentences apply to government, not to platforms, not to social media, not to any company. They can do whatever they want. Government has the separation of church and state. So while you have a company like Hobby Lobby openly advocating for theocracy, and I want to make one point about this, which I thought was funny, it made me chuckle. Hobby Lobby was a Trump supporter. The David, I forget his last name, David Levine, I think it is, the owner of Hobby Lobby, is a big time Trump supporter. Wait a second, Biden's Catholic. So are they saying that 6.5 million Americans who happen to be Catholic aren't Christian? So I was like, maybe that's not a good business plan, but okay, you're free to do it. But here is what Congress, their test for their separation of church and state. And you need to know this, because it is so easy to get you confused and actually cut your own throat by advocating for policy that's going to hurt you. And I'll get to that in a second. But here is the test. It's a three-part test. And this goes back to a recent case, 1971, not that long ago. It's called the Lemon Test because of this court case. And what government has to do is if they are going to assist, the primary purpose must be secular. So this is if a church or other organization has a homeless shelter or a food pantry, it must be for a secular purpose, and they cannot make religion a test to receive those services. Okay, so that's the first one. Second is the assistance must neither promote or inhibit religion, right? So if I am going to one of these shelters, they can't ask me what my faith is or if I've been saved. That's illegal. They can't do that if they're getting government money, right? If it's all on their own money, they can do whatever they want. And the last one is there is no excessive entanglement between church and state. So like those prayer breakfasts that you see every year, the annual prayer breakfast, that's getting kind of close to the line, right? But so you cannot legislate religion. You cannot make a law that favors into one religion or the other. This is why the advocates of prohibition on abortion never mention religion, never. They always try to side with some faux science, not religion. But then when they go back to their own constituents who are supporters of it, they'll do religion all day long. But when it comes to the legislation, they can't. And that's because of this particular court case, Lemon versus Kurtzman. So I want to make sure everyone gets this completely right, that the separation of church and state is only for government, state and federal. Has absolutely nothing to do with your free speech rights in the public square. You can go out into your city square. You can actually go to your courthouse steps just below the first step and pray all day long. The Church of Satan is really great about showing the places that they can pray and demonstrate and all of these sorts of things. So make sure you get this one right, because there are so many opportunists out there who are trying to get you to give up your free speech because of something like Hobby Lobby. If Hobby Lobby pisses you off, then the right response is don't shop there. That's it. You cannot advocate for a law to curtail their rights to free speech. So Margot says, love the Church of Satan. They keep it real out there. Yeah, me too. Absolutely, me too. Oh, hey, and Dawn, good morning. Good morning. And that's what she says. I just don't shop there. Yeah, there's so many other places where you can vote with your dollars when it comes to the free market. So
and it's absolutely the best way to affect capitalists, right? Is to take away your capital. Stop their ability to make money off of you. That's how you affect capitalists in a capitalist society.
Right, and it's pretty simple, and you don't need a law. And even Mike, you said it beautifully. He says, policies you make to use against your enemies will be used against you. And that is absolutely true. So what I saw this morning, and it was a repeat of things that I've seen before, and I don't know this gentleman's name, and I wouldn't want to unnecessarily talk about him without him being here, but he was really upset because this is a TikTok content creator. I believe it's a Black gentleman. I didn't get the details. A person of color who was really, really upset because these social media platforms, the way he said it is, you can talk about racism and you can talk about white and all of these sort of things, but the minute you mention Black Lives Matter or racism or all of these other things, you immediately get to platform. And I believe he was speaking from his personal experience. This is what happens, right? So when we are cheering on all of these big tech companies like Amazon and Apple deplatforming Parlay, and then we see it happening here on the left, particularly with the instigators, and what did Biden call us? the extremists on the left. I would be considered an extremist for having this conversation at all, and I'm white. So if you're a person of color and you're trying to have this conversation, immediately deplatformed. And we're seeing it over and over and over again. And this is part of how it's being used against us. So
Yes.
you need to get the free speech piece right. Absolutely. So yeah, okay, so misanthropic. Oh, I love you even more now. I have a medical marijuana card in Florida, and I still support my local growers instead of the billionaires dispensaries. Yeah, absolutely, wholeheartedly. Buy local, support them. And then Margot says, I need the Church of Satan to come up here and start an after-school club for Satanists. Yeah, Margot, reach out. They seem to be pretty responsive. Send them a message. I think it would be hilarious. Yeah, so this is part of where we need to get the free speech right. So we have the religiosity example of Hobby Lobby and commerce. Now let's move on to the left. AOC, the darling of the left. Here's another one where it was free speech and privacy. And she's, in my opinion, she's crossing the line. And she's doing it in a performative way. So I did post a link to this bill that she introduced. Here's where it got interesting, right? We have a bipartisan committee, I think it's 20 or 21 senators. My senator is among them from New Mexico, and then my new representative from the House is weighing in on this, who happens to be white. Yeah, so AOC got really upset because during a photo op, 10 of the 20 or 21 bipartisan committee members appeared with Biden, and they were talking about his infrastructure bill. And she got pissed off because they were all white or white appearing, right? So let's not forget that some of our friends and neighbors, like friend of the show, Dominique, is passing white. She's not white, right? So AOC saw this image and flipped her shit and decided that she was going to propose this new piece of legislation, HR 4207, to force the Office of Personnel Management, which has nothing to do with the senators, to release information about demographics on anybody who is an appointee or an employee of the Fed, particularly the White House. Here's the problem. Number one, as I mentioned, if you're pissed off about these senators, why are you now going after rank and file employees and appointees? That's the first one. Second is they already released that information that the appointees and the employees themselves volunteer, and they do it in aggregate, not in detail. And her bill, which she still has not released the text for, I checked it this morning. It takes all of 3 seconds to send them a PDF so that congress.gov can publish it and make it public, because that is part of the First Amendment rights that I have, that you have. I need to be able to access the information that you are proposing in legislation, and I need to see it for myself. Why hasn't she done this? This has been over almost 2 weeks now. It takes just a moment. I have that right under the First Amendment to read what you are proposing and not have to rely on corporate media or anyone else to tell me what it is that you wrote. So that's the other point that I want to make about AOC's bill. The third is under the 14th Amendment, we have privacy rights. If I'm appointed or I'm an employee of the federal government, it has to be my decision what to offer. So my sexual orientation, I'm not going to Tinder, I'm going to work. I don't have to tell you. And I don't care if you're pissed off about what appears to be a bunch of white faces. It's none of your business. It's nobody's business what your orientation is, your religion. It's not even your business what my ethnicity is or that of my neighbor, right? So when we're talking about infrastructure, internets, access to commerce across the global system has very little to do with sexual orientation, religion, all of these things that she put into her press release talking about this bill that we still cannot read. I hope I'm making my point clear that if you were cheering for the denigration of Hobby Lobby and separation of church and state, and this particular issue came up of AOC, they are the same. They're the same. And I need you to recognize this because you're absolutely killing free speech on all of these platforms, as well as in our community conversations. So I'm going to put this out to the chat because we have a number of people who are left and right weighing in. So what do you think? Am I way off on this? Or are you seeing the big picture here? So Vaquero Supremo says AOC calculated incompetence. Maybe she's not dumb. She's very brilliant. She knows what she's doing. I think the question is, does she believe you know what she's doing? And I saw it very clearly as performative, but I don't know. It was to me another Juneteenth holiday when we didn't ask for a Juneteenth holiday. We asked for equal protection and due process. So those are my things there. So I don't know, Andy, you have a more objective opinion than perhaps us mired in the U.S. Free speech and equal protection. What do you think?
Well, I think that a lot of people will have biases or opinions about certain things without necessarily doing a quote unquote deep dive into the thought process that got you there, right? A good example of that is the number of times over the last couple of decades where, you know, there's memes that float around. And this is a specific incident that actually did happen in a couple of states in the US, but where the Republican parties that were currently in power in those states decided that they wanted to bring in this policy where if you wanted food stamps or any type of support that you were, you know, going to be drug tested. And if you were on drugs of any kind, then you automatically were not allowed to get any support from the state, right? And, you know, people heard that, and, you know, on the surface, I guess a lot of people agreed with that. They said, okay, well, this makes sense. Let's do this because people that are getting food stamps and whatever shouldn't be on drugs. They shouldn't be taking drugs and taking the money that they get and spending it on drugs. And sure, on the surface, that made sense to people. But when they actually put these policies in place, they found out that they were just a huge waste of money because they assumed that, you know, the propaganda that Americans have been subject to, where people that are on handouts are bad actors, or they're, you know, the quote unquote Reagan welfare mom who wanted nothing but a free handout and they needed to be discouraged or chastised because of it. It turns out that people that are on these systems are basically just trying to survive and aren't spending their money on drugs. So the drug testing that they did ended up being such a waste of money because it found so few people on drugs that it was almost instantly scrapped. And the problem is, because it was an embarrassment to the administration that brought it in, they didn't tell anybody when they got rid of it, right? And so we get these memes through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, where it says they absolutely should be testing people on Social Security or on food stamps for drink. And we see this cycle happen every so often, but it's because people aren't thinking about the actual critical parts of this. They're not making the truth known to themselves, right? They need to be reminded that if you see something like this, where you know, everybody was cheering, oh, we're so tired of Donald Trump. He's such a bad person. We're cheering because Twitter got rid of him. Oh my goodness. Well, by doing that, you have just given them permission to do the exact same thing to you, right? And we have to be cognizant of that. We have to realize that it's always that we advocate for free speech. You don't have to like it, but you have to advocate for it, right? And the way, as you described, Carrie, that you deal with it is you can debate it, you can argue it, but you can't have it removed, because then that hurts us all, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think Great Goblin is agreeing with you. Capitalism preys on poverty. But how many of us, when we talked about you've got to be drug tested and all that, how many of us realized you were giving up your privacy rights for public funding of a safety net? That makes no sense. And I posted a link to the, dang, I forgot his first name, Representative Buck and Glen Greenwald in their interview. And there was one cringy moment where Buck talked about, I worry about the deficit and I worry about federal appropriations. I'm like, no, we pay for that through our GDP, through our labor. We recognize, in fact, like the school lunch program was at the request of the United States military, because they recognize that children who get good nutrition make good soldiers later and not deficient. So we collectively here in the United States, we pay for that. So why would we then take somebody's privacy rights in order to do something that's going to benefit all of us in the long run? So it goes right back to that Medicare for all thing. And then Misanthropic, you are my favorite today. Absolutely. Misanthropic says, free speech is really in danger on several fronts. Julian Assange, as a journalist, I feel that deeply. The Khashoggi thing, where we dropped it. You know, I can be assassinated now, and nobody gives a shit. So Julian Assange. And then he said, there's another one. When will they start to edit words from our vocabulary? And I have an answer for you. Andy and I did a show last week where we talked about Clyburn jumping into the special election in Ohio with Nina Turner and saying that he was endorsing Brown, her opponent, the establishment candidate, because of vocabulary. Clyburn said that he didn't like Medicare for all. He didn't like defund the police. And so here is a politician who's censoring us on our vocabulary and rhetoric in order to forward the campaign of one opponent over the other. Clyburn, what? Right? So yeah, there's your answer. And then Goblin weighs in, politicians always fail the workers, but never fail their billionaire masters.
Well, that's the key, right? That's always the key. It's when you think in terms of you know, where his statements, Clyburn was coming, and this is just a rehash of what we were talking about before, right? It's not that, you know, he doesn't want to hear that. It's that he can't, because the people that fund his campaigns don't want it, right? He is, as any politician is, they are beholden to the people that put them there, right? In a democracy, you know, ideally that's the people. In America, it's billionaires and large corporations, right? The politicians aren't acting any different than they normally would. It's just that there's this pseudo democracy that people think that exists in the United States, but it's actually an oligarchy. The control is from the rich people. They control the politicians because that's how they get their money.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And Dynama 16 agrees. And we posted that in that last segment that we did. Big Pharma is a corrupt as fuck liberal POS to the core, whose only concern is money. And yeah, that's right. He is I think the number one, if not number one, number 1, 2, or 3 in big pharma donations. But okay, so if you're just watching us for the first time, we never leave you with just complaints, blah, blah, blah. We try to educate and give you an action item. So your homework today, if any of this has touched you in a way where you feel like, there's nothing I can do. No, you have so much power, so much power. And I want to explain it to you. So first, in the links, I have posted this 405-page congressional report. This is long. I'm going to butcher his name. I'm so bad with names. Scissione report from the Judiciary Committee. And if you need help finding this, I have already posted the link, but just look up Colorado Representative Ken Buck. He's tweeting about this all over the place because even his Republican colleagues will go on Fox News and other outlets and scream about big tech, but they are not signed on to this report. So this is an antitrust push. It's not necessarily to make new legislation, but to enforce antitrust laws already on the books. So go look this up. Go follow Ken Buck. Support him. You don't have to like his Tea Party shit. You don't have to like any of that, but support him. And then we had done a story about a really big First Amendment case that is coming down, and I'm going to do a review on that yet again so you can see it. But in antitrust legislation, when you have big tech and all of these companies who are not supposed to be acting on behalf of government, this lawsuit coming out from an independent candidate who ran against Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts, that is big because he has evidence clearly showing that local politicians in Massachusetts were trying to manipulate the race using big tech. This is Twitter in particular, as kind of a cat's paw to do their bidding for them. So this particular lawsuit ties into the antitrust that we're talking about right here. So go read the report, follow Ken Buck, elevate whatever he says about this particular issue. Like, if you like the rest of his policies, do whatever you want. But we need more of the Democrats on board with this. Do you remember when they had hearing after hearing after hearing and brought Zuckerberg and all of these people before them and just chewed them a new asshole? Why aren't those people signed on to this? Why aren't those people talking to the SEC and FEC leadership about this? Why aren't those people doing something more than asking questions? This is their job. And that is where you come in, because these people work for you. And even if you feel like they're not listening to you, there's way more of us than there are of them. And each one of you has your own senator and your own representative who is in your district. I've already talked to mine about my experience here with big tech and charging us for 4 and 5G while they're delivering LTE and no connection here. And guess what she's doing? She's forwarding this to the Biden administration to talk about New Mexico and the lack of coverage here. We are not getting equal protection nor access. So it works. It may not feel like it, but it does work. So this is your homework, and you push back and tell me I'm nuts, but I see it all the time. Okay, so Vaquero has given us additional homework. I don't know what GG is. You guys can't do acronyms. I'm too old. I don't know what they. I'm not hip. It says additional homework. Watch GG's systems update interview with Ken Buck. So I don't know what GG is.
Is that Mr. Greenwald?
Oh, Glen Greenwald system update. Oh, okay. So Vaquero, I did post a link to that. If that's Glen Greenwald system update, yeah, I did post a link to it. I was watching it this morning, as well as reading the information. Yes, yeah. Vaquero says Glen Greenwald. So yes, please go watch that. Glen is I love the work that he does. Don't always agree with him, but I love that he always takes it to the nth degree, follows up on a story and asks the tough questions. So yeah, if you need a deep dive on that, Glen Greenwald has a Substack where he wrote about this. He's got a nice little YouTube video where he has the interview with Ken Buck. Like I said, my only critique of the Ken Buck interview on YouTube is it was super cringy when he talked about the deficit. And yeah, so somebody get Ken Buck an MMT status update.
Or just tell him to go talk to John Yarmouth.
Thank you. Yeah, John Yarmouth was out and proud with the MMT. I loved it. So that is what I've got for today. So and as always, if you're at all unfamiliar with what free speech actually covers, this is a really handy document called the Constitution, and you can go and read it. Free speech is 2 sentences long. That's it, 2 sentences. Learn it and love it. So Makara says, yep, MMT all the way. Yay! So and MMT is a prime example, right, where we feel powerless. I know, talking to Warren Mosler at the very, very beginnings of it, it was talk to one person, and then how many people knew about MMT by the end of the day? He told that story. So this is where all of us watching, all of you watching right now, sit and think about it, and then have one conversation. And honestly, I don't care if it's a white supremacist, if it's Satanist, if it's Christian, if it's anything. One person have this conversation about free speech and how censorship really hurts all of us. And
that's a great.
We'll get Sherry Weiss on.
That's a great exercise in critical thinking, right? When we take something that we've heard at face value, that people have heard their whole lives, right? And we apply our own set of opinions and our own set of beliefs to that, and think about those systems and what they actually mean, right? Like last night, Rohan Gray, friend of our show, Rohan, love the guy. He's was making a really good point about a situation in New York City where forever the subway system ran on tokens, right? Completely inane, no technology, no way to trace. Token, right? You put in the slot, they don't know who you are. You can go wherever you want. You don't have to worry about Big Brother watching. Well, they changed from that system, and then they issued these electronic cards to people to bill them, or to, for whatever reason, you only have to carry a card. You don't have to search for tokens in your pocket. Sold as a great idea. Wonderful, convenient. But now Big Brother knows exactly when you get on the subway, when you get off the subway, every single time you use it, right? It's now invasion of people who ride the subway in New York City's privacy. But nobody thought of it in those terms, right? They didn't see that this might be an issue. That is it really that inconvenient to use tokens in the subway? Because it worked, right? So you have to look at situations like that. Why is this happening? Why are people saying what they say? And what's the narrative that's being told to you in mainstream media and from your politicians? It's a very good exercise in critical thinking. And it really helps us to keep our information private, to keep ourselves safe. It reminds me of that Joe Carey, where the couple are at home in the evening and they're having a conversation, and the gentleman is whispering. He's talking like this. And his wife says, "Why are you whispering?" Says, "I don't want Jeff Bezos to know what I'm saying." And she said, "Oh, don't worry, honey. Jeff Bezos isn't listening. You're being so silly." And he said, "Oh, yeah, you're right." And she laughed, and he laughed, and Siri laughed, and Alexa laughed, and Google laughed.
Okay, I just about that. So we had I forget what it was, the Google thing. I don't think that's, is it Alexa? I don't remember.
No, they're two different systems. Google's its own system.
Oh, okay, so we had one of those. I had it in the kitchen, And my husband was talking to me about, privacy and all of that. And he was, Google will tell you jokes and all sorts of stupid things to get your recipes. And so he was having fun with it. And then he turned around and he says, Google, are you listening in on our conversation? And it got quiet. And then all of a sudden she came back with like a 4-page legalese. I mean, word for word of their privacy policy. And if you have more, and we both went, holy shit, they are.
Well, that's how they work. How do you activate it? You say, hey, Google, or hey, Alexa, right? And they turn on.
Right.
Well, they have to always be listening. And that information is going somewhere.
Yeah. Exactly,
that's why I don't own one.
So, Vaquera, I don't anymore. Vaquera says he's agreeing with you on convenience. It's put forth at the expense of everything else, and we're in deep trouble. Tech won't save us. Critical thinking will, I hope. And yes, you get what we're trying to do here on our show. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in bright and early. We are, from what I understand, the only morning live show in this particular space. We are so proud to be part of Fred Hampton Leftist. So if you have not already, and you're watching on the Fred Hampton Leftist YouTube channel, please like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon so you'll be notified when all of the great content comes. So if you're listening to us on Spotify, iTunes, and iHeartRadio as part of House of Public Discourse, we appreciate you. Thank you. And if you are watching us on either our particular house, our house channels, our Hair of the Dog, Facebook, Twitter, all of these sorts of things, we appreciate you supporting us. We've been doing this for a while, and we will continue so long as we are technically able, and encouraging not only how to find the resources, how to take back your power, and critical thinking. So we appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much. So Dawn, I don't think I own one until my kid's tablet gave me a recipe, right? And that's where this starts. That's where they get you. Easy recipes. So
it was funny because
we appreciate it.
We were at a friend's place, just quickly. We were at a friend's place playing cards one evening. This was pre-pandemic, and they had a Google box, right? And my friend said, hey Google, play some whoever, Doobie Brothers or Bad Company or whatever. And instantly there were 4 devices that all kicked in, one being my phone in my pocket and my wife's phone and another phone. It was like, they were all talking at the same time. It said, it's an invasion.
That's so true. Oh yeah, they all play different songs. Yeah.
Yes.
That's hilarious. All right. So Andy, that's all I got. Oh, by the way, if you are watching, we do take your requests. So if there's a subject that you've seen covered somewhere else and you have more questions about it, we'll do the deep dive research on it and bring that to you. So let us know if there's something that you want to talk about or something that you have questions about. We'll do that. But we will be back on Monday, bright and early, 10 a.m. Eastern live. So we appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Andy, take us out.
All right. Thank you, Carrie, as always. It's nice that you didn't drop off of this call. That was a lovely change from the last show. Hopefully we've got this thing sorted out now where we're on the rebound and able to deliver our content without fear of dropping off the call. And so that's a good thing for us. And I'd just like to say to everyone, thank you for watching us today. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and your weekend. And we will see you here bright and early on Monday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G.